So this panel is all about great entrepreneurs from Latin America or doing business in Latin America, some based in New York, some based in Buenos Aires, but all of them doing really successful companies and businesses. I would like you to make a 1-minute intro, each of you, please. Andres?
Okay, I'll start. My name is Andres Barreto, and I am the founder of OnSwipe here in New York. We do tablet publishing and advertising and touch devices. Also founder of Pulso Social, which is the leading blog covering entrepreneurship and technology in Latin America. Social Ads and PR, which is a PR agency that is also now opening up an accelerator with NXTP Labs, somewhere here in Colombia. And previous to that, Groove Shark, which is a music streaming service, started out of Florida.
And how old are you?
I am 25.
I'm an old entrepreneur. I started OfficeNet when I was 24, which we sold to Staples, so now it's Staples in Latin America. And then I moved to the US to start Excellent, which was sort of my dream to build a global company from the US, which I did, and I then went back to Argentina 3 years ago and started Restaurando, which is sort of an open table in Latin America. And so I sort of have an identity crisis. I look at my badge every time I go to a conference to see who I'm representing at that time. And I'm also the chairman of Endeavor in Argentina.
My name is Alex Toranaga. I'm Colombian. I am the co-founder of Toranaga Labs, which is an incubator of startups, especially marketplaces. Most of these companies develop technology in Colombia, but we target global markets. And in particular, I'm the co-founder of Voice Bunny. Voice Bunny is a service that provides professional voiceovers using a crowdsourcing platform. We co-founded that business many years ago, and today is the largest provider of professional voiceovers in the planet in more than 50 languages.
John McIntyre. Unlike the rest of this group, I'm not actually the entrepreneur behind. I'm not the entrepreneur behind Open English. I'm the chairman, non-executive chairman. So I'm a sort of professional cheerleader, financier, mentor. But I'm actually Cuban-born, grew up in Latin America, and was a banker for many years. Don't hold that against me. But for the last 8 years, I've been involved in several private equity funds focused on the U.S. Hispanic market and Latin America, and been involved in Open English for about 4 years. Very involved in Endeavor also since its early days. So a variety of things now that I'm doing in terms of looking at opportunities in Latin America, particularly in the education sector.
Good. John, tell us a little bit about, I think education is booming right now, but in the next 5 years, it's going to change dramatically. Like, all people in Latin America will go online and can be educated. It's not right now going to university, but also like 15 years old kids, they're building mobile apps, they learn through Google or YouTube, and you are, making all people in Latin America learn English. Do you see also Open English going to other kind of classes? And tell us before that, please, a little bit the story about Open English, how much money you raise, and how was the story?
Okay. Well, let me start on that part first. I got involved, as I say, about 4 years ago when it was a tiny little startup in Venezuela, of all places. And they were selling maybe 50 courses a month. The basic idea, it's a 1-year subscription is the core product, which allows unlimited access not only to all the content online and the personalized curriculum, et cetera, during the course of that year, which attempts to get you to be fluent in English, but it's also has unlimited access to live courses. So 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, you can get online every hour in the hour and step into a live classroom has a maximum of 5 students. The average is about 3 usually. And so you can see the teacher, you have to be obviously logged in with broadband. But you can see the live picture of the teacher, who's a native English-speaking teacher, and you can hear your other fellow students. So anyway, it's obviously the convenience factor. It's cost competitive, and it's become a very popular way to avoid the whole brick and mortar experience. But just to finish the quick story, so it was selling maybe 50 courses a month only in Venezuela when I got involved. It was a little crazy. I threw a bunch of money at this because First of all, I spent part of my life growing up in Venezuela, so I was a little bit aware of the the challenges, but the good potential of it as well. And also, I'd actually taught at Berlitz a couple summers, so I knew the challenges with that model as well. So a few things connected that allowed me to sort of take this risk, which, in retrospect, seemed a little crazy. But I did help raise money. The first, particularly 09, 10 was tough because, again, coming from that neighborhood and trying to establish this business pan-regionally looked very, very risky and very challenging from a VC point of view. So the funding in those 2 years was really myself, friends, and then some families that we brought in sort of as quasi-strategic investors. But, in the last 18 months, since the thing's taken off, we have, well north of 50,000 students now and adding, 5, 6, 7,000 a month. The VC community, which of course now is very tuned into Latin America, has put in over $50 million into the company.
$50 million to the company.
Yeah.
Okay, already.
Some of that has bought back shares, so it's not $50 million, not fully invested in the company, but still we've raised $50 million from different VCs. And it's been very gratifying because actually we've got now representation from Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, and a Latin American VC as well.
Good.
So,
okay.
Anyways, that's enough of the story. But in terms of your other question, I do think that the open English model is very adaptable to a lot of other things as well. It's not the degree granting approach. It's the practical, accessible, competitively priced education that the aspiring middle class in Latin America and other emerging markets is really craving for. And so I think we're going to see a lot of competition. There's going to be a lot of great successes in that space.
Okay. Andy, tell us about, I know a little bit about the story of Restaurando, that you advise a lot of entrepreneurs, and some of them come to you with an idea, and you say, hey, look, your idea is good, but I think I have one that is better, maybe, which is Restaurando. So you partner in a kind of, you're a co-founder, you're not in a day-to-day operations, but you help them to raise money. So how you deal as a co-founder and working with young entrepreneurs?
Well, the story of Restaurando is pretty interesting because there were these two entrepreneurs that came to me and Santiago Vilinkis. We both started OfficeNet together. And they came with the idea of, selling home insurance in Argentina. It was a very boring business, as you can imagine. So we sat down, they went through a whole presentation, and when they finished, we said, listen, guys, you're really smart, and you're coming with this shitty business plan on a shitty industry, which is extremely boring. Why are you just thinking of those kind of ideas? Why don't you just think of something easier to do? Just look at the U.S. market, look at some key emerging, rising stars, and try to think how you're going to replicate that in Latin America through a regional approach that goes beyond Argentina. And they said, well, do you have any idea? And we said, well, why don't you look at OpenTable? It just went public. It's $700 million in market cap. And we haven't yet seen a very successful team implementing the OpenTable kind of approach in Latin America. So they said, so what do we do? I said, well, why don't you go out there, spend a week, come back, tell us what you think. So they came back a week later. They were really, really smart engineers in their early 20s. And they came back and we said, we love the idea. We see it. We know why this would work. We know how we should roll it out. And we said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to fund you. We're going to give you the sort of the initial 100K. But on top of that, we suggest is the following. So the first thing is we sort of have a good guess of what kind of initial prototype we need to build in order to be able to get probably, pre-money of $1 million or to $1.5 million and be able to raise $500,000. And then what we should probably do in order to raise, $3 to $4 million at a pre-money of maybe 6 or 7. We need to do this. These are the two sort of pit stops at which we need to stop or we need to achieve. If you do that, we can guarantee to you we're going to raise that amount of money at those valuations. And what we suggest is we're so confident that we will be able to do that we suggest we build a sort of a success scheme where if we achieve that, we'll split the equity, roughly 50-50. If we don't do that, so if we do that within 12 months, then we're probably going to have a $10 million company. And we're all going to be very happy. If we don't do that, then, we fail, we lose 100K, and then you keep going. And that's what we did. So these guys are really good. They were really good implementing. So, and they were very, very cost conscious. I mean, just to give it a couple of examples, they were buying tickets from Aerolíneas Argentinas, like the airline that it always takes off, but you don't know whether it's going to land. They negotiated a deal where they would do mystery shopping. It's like just like a normal customer saying, did they bring the food on time? Was the food cold? Whatever, in exchange for free tickets. And they were then going to these hostels. So they're writing to me saying, I'm sleeping, hugging my Apple, my MacBook, because I'm afraid they might steal it from me. But there's this narco sleeping in the same room where I am. So they were flying for free in exchange for mystery shopping surveys, going to hostels. And with the first 100K, we managed to have 5 restaurants in Brazil, 5 restaurants in Argentina, and roughly 100 people booking their online reservations through Restaurando. We went and raised $500,000 from the Mercado Libre guys, the Kasek guys, and then we raised 3.2 million from Silicon Valley investors, the original founders of Salesforce and Yammer and others. So it was a very interesting story, and at least my learning was I see sort of an emerging second wave of entrepreneurs, more of the old ones like I am, supporting the new entrepreneurs through a different approach, which is accelerating and bringing the expertise of knowing what needs to happen and what the checklists are for those that invest, and really partnering together in building very quickly a strategy to go to market. I mean, most of these opportunities are pretty much a winner takes all. So there won't be 5 open tables in the US, and there won't be more than probably 1 restaurant, and I hope it's a restaurant in Latin America. So that, I think, opens the room for sort of new kind of partnerships between what I was saying, old entrepreneurs and emerging entrepreneurs working together and saying, if we can really make this happen within a year, then we're ahead of the pack. And now Restaurando's challenge is, how do we serve the market, mostly in Brazil, in a way in which they can adopt the technology.
Great. Andres, Alex, you both, Alex, you have Toranaga Labs, you have Voice Bunny. Andres, you have Pulso Social, OnSwipe. How do you deal with so many things and at the same time, and how do you deal with talent and management people?
So those are 2 very different questions, but I'll answer the first one. Even though I've started a lot of companies, I am not Jack Dorsey or all these other guys that run, or Elon Musk that runs like 2 crazy companies at the same time. I can only barely run 1 company at a time. So I'm just a co-founder of the other ones, and I provide unsolicited advice a lot, and then it's annoying to them, so I tone it down a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, I only focus on one company, and that company is OnSwipe. And the other ones I support when they ask me, and I also do unsolicited advice. And then on managing talent, I think the competitive advantage that I had with OnSwipe was the fact that I was able to get in the initial team, the first engineer we had was based out of Guadalajara. And it was an engineer that built the prototype. We gave him a weekend. We tried to build it in 1 weekend. It took 3 weeks, but we launched it. And instead of going to the Mexican market or Latin American market, which would have been what seems natural to me, because I knew all the publishers there, I knew all the journalists there, it was actually more efficient for us to go after the American market. Because the first day we had a payment processor, and we published it on the blogs, TechCrunch, we got distribution, and we had paying customers. Our first paying customer was actually John Borthwick from BetaWorks, and then they eventually invested in our company. Whereas had I gone after the Latin American market, it would have taken me more time, more money, and more effort to reach the scale that I have today. So the benefit that I have from having an international or ability to both recruit and build and grow is I have access to talent that is very, very, very good, and I don't have to struggle with as getting talent in the U.S. But the advantage is because technology is the same anywhere, I'm able to target a global market from day one and have an easier time, make more money faster, easier by targeting a global market.
Alex?
So I had to learn the lesson that these 2 guys mentioned a couple of moments ago the hard way. I think that most of us here know that if you're an entrepreneur, you suffer of ADHD by default. I suffer of chronic ADHD. Since last year, I ended up being an executive in 3 different businesses. You probably listened yesterday to Diego Saez of WeHostels. I was the CTO of WeHostels while being the CEO of VoiceBunny, while being the CEO of yet another company called Booking Markets.
Are you married? Are you?
Fortunately, my wife is the co-founder of VoiceBunny, so she understands the challenge of being an entrepreneur. My lesson is don't do it. Focus in one, as they have done. And to some extent, we did that with Toranaga Labs initially. Most of the companies that I co-founded with Toranaga Labs, I was an investor and the chairman and an advisor. But we had a team of people executing the actual idea while I was focusing only one company at a time. Last year, I don't know why, I ended up going crazy, doing too many things. In terms of talent, by default, the very first business that I co-founded here in the US, we had the software development team in Colombia while we had the management, marketing, sales team here in the US. And that has scaled pretty well. The challenges that we have come across, though, is communications. But if you build a business from the very beginning, keeping in mind that it's a global business, is going to scale easily in terms of communications because everything is going to be written down to some extent. The other challenge that we have realized recently is where you hire people. I try to hire product people in Latin America. I haven't been able to find good product people in Latin America. Good product people tend to be not even in New York City, in Silicon Valley. So you have to bring them from Silicon Valley, ex-Google, ex-Facebook people. Developers, they are amazing in Latin America. Designers, they are also amazing in Latin America. Salespeople in here. So the lesson is if you're trying to do something global, you have to have the sales team where your clients are, but you can have really good software development people in Latin America. And finally, the 2 things that I try to do is I try to hire people that are better than I am in whatever their responsibility is going to be. And B, something that I realized recently, I'm trying to hire ex-entrepreneurs. And the fact that we have Toranaga Labs and we get a lot of pitches from companies have been really useful in that sense because the most passionate people in the company, in VoiceBunny that I have right now, are people that used to have a startup. And maybe they were successful and they sold it. Maybe they were not successful and they had to shut it down. But they are more passionate than anybody else in the team.
John, how old are you? How old are you?
55.
55. Okay, imagine you are 25, but with all of your experience. Which company would you like to start? Which industries you like? Which trends you follow?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm going to go back to, where we started. I don't see much, sort of bigger blue ocean type of opportunity right now than the global emerging middle class. Okay, so aspirational middle class that suddenly has money in their pocket, not just Latin America, obviously, but everywhere. That and how to, how to address their aspirations. So obviously, back to the education thing, but there's various spin-off ideas on that. But if you can deliver educational products to them, which are accessible, and again, be it on the web or be it mobile, whatever, and that are affordable, and again, it's things that can help them get ahead. I mean, obviously, English is important in many fields, but whether it be software, code writing, or graphic design, or just basic business skills, again, not in terms of trying to frame it in the sense of a degree, but something that really helps them advance. To me, there's going to be a lot of winners in that space. And so I know I'm going back to the same theme, but I really honestly don't see a better set of opportunities.
Andy, how do you see your 2013? You are now in Restaurando, you are the president of Endeavor Argentina. Do you see yourself going back full-time to start a new company, or what is your plans?
I wish I knew. I'm taking what I describe as a very intense sabbatical, basically meaning it's a full year where I just free flow, but I work more than ever before. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what to do. I'm quite concerned with what's happening in the political arena in Argentina, So I'm dedicating a lot of pro bono time to that.
Freire Presidente.
No, Freire President, no. That would be a nightmare for the country. I mean, not only for me. No, but I'm supporting some of the political key guys there. So I'm trying to devote some time to that. I'm also working with Santi on building a new fund that is trying to replicate what Restaurando did as a principle, and trying to escalate that and to scale that through a similar approach, which is let's find A+ entrepreneurs, let's identify opportunities that can be scaled, let's bring them together, let's mentor them and really scale them through a similar approach to what we did with Restaurando. So most of my time will be devoted to that. It's called Quasar Ventures, and we're finalizing the funding phase now to really start scaling it. But it's not going to be a fund. It's going to be more like equity raised, money raised as equity to be able to support that. And that's going to be taking most of my time next year.
Okay. Andres, what do you think we need in Latin America to have more successful entrepreneurs like you, like Alex, Andy, all of you, John? What do you think is needed in our region? What do you see in New York? You're based here in New York, that we can replicate or we can learn from New York?
I mean, I think when I started covering entrepreneurship in Latin America in 2008, the excuses I would hear is that there is no culture. There's no entrepreneurship culture. So instead of complaining about it, I decided to contribute to it by doing Pulso Social. Then I heard that there was no talent, and that's not true. Now, I work with very talented people, a lot of them from Latin America, a lot of them work from Latin America, a lot of them are from Latin America working with me. So we've proven that there is talent. And then the last excuse that I heard that now we're changing is there's no capital. Well, now there's tons of capital. And I say tons because there are VCs, investors, angels that are asking me all the time to give them deals. And now the problem I'm facing is I have no deals to give them. And I think I don't know what it would be to replicate as a model from the US in Latin America, but what I do want to see is more entrepreneurs going after global products. I think the success stories of the past have been building, grabbing an idea that's working in the US and then building its execution in Latin America. And although I think that's commendable, I also think now there's easier ways to grow faster, make more money, cheaper. And that is building global products, but not necessarily worrying about building the next Facebook or the next Instagram. It's understanding that you can actually make more money easier if you start building for problems that you have as an individual, instead of looking at markets of like, oh, it looks like green, eco, whatever is huge now, or phones in the middle class is going to blow up, so I'm going to try to copy a model and go after the market. But instead, build products for problems that you have, that you start out as your own market, independent of geography. And now you can set up Stripe within 15 minutes and have a payment processing system. You can get coverage and distribution, within hours and get customers right away. Instead of fighting the uphill battle of going to your local market. If I'm successful in Colombia, I'll be successful then in Argentina and then in Mexico and then so on and so forth. I think that's a fallacy. And I think in the end, it turns out to be harder. Unless, of course, you have a competitive advantage that's not technology. But as a technology entrepreneur myself, as somebody that doesn't have influential families or connections in whoever owns the monopoly in whatever country, my competitive advantage is building a better product faster and monetizing it. And I think today we have the technology that we didn't have 10 years ago, that you can get up and running in a weekend, launch a product, get press, and then have a global product from the beginning. And I did that also, with a team in Mexico. 54 hours, we built a company. By Sunday night, we had press, and a couple months later, we sold it. And it was a global company. So that's what I think we need to see more examples of. And we don't need hundreds of entrepreneurs doing that. We don't need even 10. If we have one entrepreneur or two entrepreneurs per country, or just two entrepreneurs in the whole region doing a global innovative product, that the acquisition or the exit is not human resources. It's not I am saving the trouble of the whatever global client in recruiting. It's I am selling IP, I am selling innovation. Something that we see in Northern and Eastern Europe, something that we see coming from Israel. There's no reason why we can't do it in Latin America.
So we will open 2 questions in 1 minute. The last question for all of you, I will say the name of one company, but you have to answer with only one word, okay? So, John, Square.
Opportunity.
Pinterest.
Estrogen.
What?
What did you say?
Estrogen.
Estrogen.
Stranger. Andy, Path.
Amazing.
Andres, Pandora.
LOL.
What?
LOL. LOL.
Okay, thank you, guys.
I'll try to keep it brief. So this question's for Andy. This question's for Andy, and it speaks to the steps or the milestones that you were talking about earlier in the Restaurando development phase, and it's philosophical. Do you think that it's more important to have milestones that are more difficult to reach and maybe take the risk of hitting them or not hitting them, or do you think that it's more important to have things that are relatively achievable and then add more milestones later? Or something else?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I have already digested what the best approach is between the two you're mentioning. When we started with Restaurando, what I knew is a couple of things. First is we said we need to prove that people are willing to make online reservations, and the best way to do it is by having at least 5 restaurants that are willing to provide the service and customers that are willing to place their bookings online. The second one is it needs to be in more than one country, and since we were Argentinians, we said it needs to be Brazil. And the third one is that we don't care whether people are paying for it at this stage. So we were doing it for free to the restaurants, and we were putting widgets in the restaurant websites. I don't know, I just had the sense, I tend to think more and more as I get older as an investor than an entrepreneur. So I said, if I were an investor, what would I like to see to validate the model? And I said, those are the things I would like to see. You're doing it in 2 countries, restaurants are happy, customers are happy, and you have an application that is solid enough to think that this will scale. So that was it. And then we said, well, now we need to go to the next one. So what do we need here? Well, we need to know that some restaurants are paying for the service and they're happy with it. So if someone were to call them, they would say, yeah, I mean, this is great. This is bringing me new customers. Customers are happy and we have repetitive purchase. So I don't know why, but I always tend to think like, what are the, I'm not sure whether it's like, I don't see it as whether it's challenging or not challenging. I'm just see it as whether that is the next plateau that will prove the concept in its next phase. Exactly. It's more like, if we do this, we've proven something. If we don't do this, then we need to make it happen before we can claim that we did something.
Yeah. Do you have a process for finding entrepreneurs? Do they approach you? You approach them? What's your way of finding value there? Because I think the target for Restaurando was finding the right guys that had the drive to take it from nothing to the 5 restaurants.
Well, that is the criteria always, is finding the passionate guys that will make something out of nothing. Mm-hmm. The problem is, how do you identify the passion? Because I haven't found anyone that would say, well, I'm not passionate. I mean, it's like,
exactly.
I remember an exercise where people were asked, if we were going to do an exercise here, say, rate yourself whether you think you're above average intelligence in the room, just as average, or below average. Everyone would say, I'm above average, which is mathematically impossible. Half of us are below and half of us are above, okay? So one of the things we learned with Excellent, what Excellent does, which I didn't speak about because it's not very high-tech oriented, is we do a lot of culture transformation. So we work with Fortune 500 companies in the globe, Singapore, Sydney, London, doing culture transformation. And we learned a lot about what makes behavioral change happen. So one of the technologies in terms of knowledge that we brought was how do we identify the traits that rely behind successful entrepreneurs, and how do we identify and measure that? So we have hundreds of people coming to us and as entrepreneurs, and we just ask them to go through a process or a filter that allows us to say, well, these are really the ones that have, we call them quasars, that they're really real quasars. There's quasars are particular stars in the galaxy. So say these guys really have what it takes.
Thank you.
That's what we do.
So we are running out of time. Thank you so much, guys. Hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.